head is killing me. Wait. Where the hell am I? Is that space? Was I in space last night? Ugh, this is the last time I have my weekly Tuesday night ice cream binge.
Oh man, weekly Tuesday night ice cream binge? I've been there.
Hi. Are you like a mouse?
No. I'm like a rat?
Pardon me. So, Miss Rat Person, where the hell are we?
Oh, this is the Skypeak.
Ah! What? Were you here the whole time?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about the Skypeak.
What on earth is a Skypeak?
Well, we're not on Earth. We're on a giant spaceship floating in cyberspace. Oh, you should see the outside. It's an engineering marvel.
Okay, well, I can't exactly see the outside from here, but I'll take your word for it.
Hi.
Yeah.
I have to draw you.
Hello! It seems you've all had time to get vaguely acquainted with your new guest, Mr. Blue Genocide.
Wait, what? You know my name? Well, my internet name. It's not, whatever. I bet you're behind all this.
Well, yeah. I'm on the computer screen laughing evilly at you. Of course I'm behind this.
What did you do to me? What am I doing on this weird friggin' ship thing? And if I don't start hearing some lengthy expositing, I'm gonna put my hand through that screen and strangle you with that necktie.
Okay, sheesh. I thought Canadians were supposed to be nice. Anyway, the reason I put you here is quite simple. I work for an intergalactic corporation called the MOM, and let's just say my associate and I, we're looking for ways to expand our revenue stream. Check! Exposit our plans so I can rest my voice.
Using the past decade as a frame of research, we found that YouTube video essays are one of the easiest ways to accrue a source of passive income. If we were to have you here to make our videos, we would see profit margins in the MOM reach record highs, making us filthy stinking rich.
With this Skybeak as your base of operations, and with a colorful cast of characters we've accrued to make witty banter with, and maybe merch sometime down the line, we've perfectly engineered this show to make buckets of sweet, sweet cash!
I don't even know who these guys are.
Oops, silly willy me. Introductions are in order. Mutsy, she's a lovable furry creature, but she's got one heck of a tood. Say one of your classic one-liners, Mutsy.
Fuck.
Rudy, he does machines. And I mean it, too. He tried to have his way with the ship before I had to stop him.
One of these days.
Neil, he's Neil. He draws.
I'm done drawing you.
That certainly is me, I guess.
Certainly is a strong word.
Man, so he kidnapped all of us.
Well, not necessarily. You see,
I posted an advert on hotmilfs.com, and these three psychos actually responded to it. If I knew there was anyone crazy enough to do that, they'd make for interesting house guests. Your house guests.
Oh, gross. You guys don't have ad block?
I can't use adblock. How am I gonna know what I want if no one tells me?
I was actually on hotdilfs.com.
Okay, you weirdos are all introduced. Now, go do video. Bye-bye.
Okay, Mozzie, Rudy, Neil. I guess we gotta start making a video about, like, a game or something?
so, what do you want to talk about?
Well, there was this one game.
Let's have a dazzling development.
It was the late 80s, and life was pretty great, as long as you weren't one of the following minorities. And this is a video game. It's everything wrong with society today, says that one uncle that you only see at Christmas. It's probably best to tune him out now. He'll thank me later. Of course, this is just what the normies see as a video game. It's been about 45 years since Atari Pac-Man, and people are still scared of it. Truth is, I am too, but therapy is too expensive. And while the idea of playing a single Atari game for longer than 15 minutes could be considered corporal punishment in some third world countries, there's one game on the old Atari 2600 that seems vaguely familiar. This quirky little game with this weird mustache guy in this skin-tight red onesie jumping over cookies as he tries to save a Simpsons character from a melted brown Lego man. The sex fiend is Mario.
Yahoo!
Probably the most famous video game character in the world today, but he's not what this video is about. Saying that though, I think it's imperative to the story I'm telling you to understand how Mario got his rise to fame, and that begins with the company that created him, a Japanese company called Nintendo. Nintendo had actually set up shop in the previous 80s, those being the 1880s, as a Hanafuda card manufacturer. They did this for a while, alongside all kinds of crazy get-rich-quick schemes, like Disney merch, not Legos, and guns. A lot of early Nintendo history involves light guns and shooting shit. They even had a hand in the Magnavox Odyssey gun. Are we sure this wasn't an American company? While all of this got Nintendo some minor success, it was pissing off Universal that really got them on the path of opening up a really cool museum that a certain Blue Genocide can't go to. Donkey Kong, an arcade game originally envisioned as a game based on Popeye, morphed more and more into another sort of knockoff altogether. Universal tried suing over this, but one John Kirby demonstrated that Universal themselves proved the character was public domain not even 10 years prior to this in a big lawsuit over the 1976 remake.
And Masahiro Sakurai himself repaid his services by naming his son after him.
At this point, Nintendo had one final hurdle to overcome, and that was the home market. I think we all know this part of the tale, but just to keep this brief, by 1984, nobody wanted a home video game console. These things were expensive too. Nobody really mentions that. Here's a receipt from 1981. Showing that this person spent $211.60 on an Atari 2600 with 3 games. Adjusted for inflation, that's $768.11 USD. And this is what he got. And remember, these were the good games. Atari had ruined the market by filling the stores with garbage games, barely functional hardware. And Joe Everyman had enough. He and every other red-blooded American said, E.T., go home, as long as your home is a fucking landfill. But the thing is, the people working at Nintendo knew their Famicom, introduced in 1983 in Japan, would be a hit elsewhere. They just had to open the minds of a consumer base that didn't want it. This is easier said than done. See, it's hard to come to grips with this now, but Thing Japan didn't immediately translate to 1 billion sales. Nobody knew what a Dragon Ball was. They were voting for Reagan or watching The Cosby Show. You're all American, aren't you?
I'm not!
A world war was still in recent memory then. A war that had Americans grow up to harbor these unfortunate beliefs. And that did affect Famicom's chances at success. When the NES didn't launch in 1985 in test markets, they did everything they could to not let people think of it as a video game console. They packaged it with a robot and a light gun to show people that this gray lunchbox, as some Nintendo employees have lovingly called it, was an entertainment system and not, you know, another way to play tennis. This and the risky offer to buy back any unsold consoles from retailers just to get them into the store in the first place. A lot of things are credited as to why by 1987 Nintendo was what every kid was asking for, but none of this would have mattered if these were the same crappy games Atari and others have been putting out onto the market. And there's one game that cemented that more than any other, and it sure as hell wasn't Robot Gyro.
Super Mario!
Super Mario Bros. Was originally meant to be sort of a swan song for the original Famicom. By its Japanese release in 1985, it was felt that Nintendo had gotten everything they could out of the original Famicom, and their next big release, The Legend of Zelda, would be the first game released on the Famicom Disk System, an add-on that would use a new storage medium. Back to Super Mario Bros., the word on the street was that it turned out to be a pretty good game. So far, you listen to this video, you probably think that this is a happy-go-lucky tale about the down-and-out underdog who rises up against all odds, don't ya? Well, by the end of the 80s, they weren't just in the North American video game industry, they were the whole damn thing. If it was a game you played on a television, parents called it Nintendo, and not for all squeaky clean, innocent reasons either. Have you ever heard anyone compare Nintendo to Disney? That applies to their business practices too. I'm talking about having a firm, steady grip on third parties, preventing companies like Capcom and Konami from publishing their games on other home consoles for 5 years, and threatening retail stores from carrying the competition. And look, I'm skipping over a lot of the shady shit Nintendo pulled. I could go over how they tried to fight Blockbuster and their feud with Atari, or Game Genie. And did they ever see any kind of punishment for this behavior? Yeah, they had to hand out $5 off coupons for Nintendo games. It wasn't like this everywhere, mind you. Europe is still a mystery that confuses scholars to this day, shouting out some crap about Sega and playing games at 50 hertz, spouting off about their Amstrads and ZX Spectrums like anyone knows what the hell they're talking about. And in Japan, well, the PC Engine showed up in 1987 and had been starting to steal some of the thunder from Nintendo with their 16-bit graphics. And then, finally, there's the main character of our story, Sega. The early history of Sega is a lot harder to parse than their competitors, since the Sega that we become aware of in the 80s is really an amalgamation of several small companies that were founded in the US and Japan between the 40s and 60s. But by the end of the 1970s, Sega's arcade industry began to boom. The arcade business was lucrative for Sega, with consistent hits like Space Harrier, Afterburner, and Outrun. This hopefully sounds very familiar to you, as I just got finished explaining how Nintendo was doing the same thing, unless you were asleep.
Bitch!
Unfortunately, the whole home video game industry thing was not Sega's bag, baby.
I'm telling you, baby, that's not mine.
The Sega Mark I launched first in '83, on the exact same day as the Famicom, and while initially really successful and followed up with the Sega 1002, a redesigned version of the same hardware with a new cartridge shape, and even a personal computer variant somewhere in the middle, it hadn't had the lasting support the Famicom got. When you're trying to compete against Donkey Kong and Popeye with Congo, Bongo, and Flicky, you should see why that didn't work.
Babe, you're weaving me? I showed you my Congo Bongo!
Sega tried to upgrade their machine, releasing what they called the Sega Mark III in Japan, which we know as the Master System at the end of 1985. It was stronger than the Famicom this time, but it really didn't matter. I hope you can recognize the pattern with Sega and its hardware. Now, it was 1989, and this time it was the Genesis, or Mega Drive everywhere else. Once again, writing was on the wall. Sega's newest game console had not set the world on fire the way they had hoped. And the biggest problem here is obvious in hindsight. Nintendo had abandoned the arcade industry almost 5 years prior to this, while Sega's entire name were their arcade hits. That's great for those who love Shinobi or Space Harrier, but these aren't the kind of games Nintendo was making. Zelda or Mario could last a player hours, but a game of, say, Outrun lasts a couple of minutes. Do you need to have that at your home? And yeah, okay, maybe games like Outrun or Shinobi could have competed with Super Mario Bros., but it wasn't just that game they had to worry about anymore. After a misstep with the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, Nintendo went above and beyond with their next release for the 8-bit Nintendo, and that was Super Mario Bros. 3. ROM memory costs had dropped significantly since the release of the disk system, to the point that with the rampant piracy that add-on faced in its lifetime, it could be considered a minor mistake in Nintendo's otherwise great track record at this point in history, and there was no denying it. The disk system was made obsolete by the very ROM cartridge technology it was meant to replace. This ended up giving the Famicom an extraordinarily long lifespan. And fellas, let me put it this way. The 16-bit TurboGrafx and Genesis were mighty fine. 8-bit Nintendo had special help that helped get it up during its twilight years.
Are you comparing game consoles to being impotent?
Boy, you sure picked up on that one fast.
Well, let's just say I ran into similar issues.
Super Mario Bros. 3 did everything it thought possible on the original Famicom, and as the original had shown, but this sequel proved, video games are not a fad, but a hobby that was here to stay, despite how your mom feels about it. Also, tell her I'll call her when I'm wrapped up here. The thing is, Nintendo of America was in an even better spot. Even the earliest Famicom titles were still new in America, and with tons of Japanese games they could drip feed the American consumer, including the replacement Super Mario Bros. 2 that was effectively a ROM hack of another game made for the Americans when the real Super Mario Bros. 2 was considered too hard. But we all know that. So Nintendo of America had decided to spend 1989 and 1990 resting on their laurels, hyping up the release of Super Mario Bros. 3. And that took all the hype away from any other game console. And if all of that wasn't bad enough for Sega, the Super Famicom, the successor to the Famicom, was on its way aiming for a 1989 release. And while some good games were coming out soon, or were out for the Genesis, it wasn't enough. Alex Kidd, the current mascot of Sega, had utterly failed. Alex picked Rock and Sega picked Termination Papers. At this point, why would anyone buy Sega? Nintendo was going to have a stronger machine in a few years, with more Mario. The fact of the matter was, Sega needed a killer app, and it needed it yesterday.
Skypeak Online is possible thanks to viewers like you. Thank you. Live in your world. Subscribe to ours.
In 1989, 25-year-old game designer Naoto Oshima had begun work on conceptualizing a game he had called Twin Stars. The concept of two twin boys inside a dream world where they would go up against a nightmare creature called 13. While this at first sounds completely unrelated to anything autism related, it was the first spark. Higher-ups were intrigued by the concept, but not too enthused with the characters. Oshima was stuck. Around that time, 24-year-old Yuji Naka was one of Sega's best programmers, getting his start on Sega programming on an SG-1000 title called Girl's Garden, and moving his way through several Master System ports and projects, including the very relevant Sega title Phantasy Star, which is important to our story for several reasons. For one, the project was an attempt by the team who made it to make a JRPG to rival the Famicom's Dragon Quest series, which was insanely popular in Japan at that time. Look at that. History repeating itself. The other connecting point was how 3 Sonic Team alumni were attached to this game first. We'll talk about Rieko Kodama in a bit here, but after getting his start on the Sega Master System Rocky game as an artist, this was one of Oshima's first projects, and originally envisioned as a Master System title as well. Phantasy Star 2 would see release on the Genesis in 1989, and once again, the same 3 members would work on it all together. As you can see, RPGs and Sonic are directly connected to each other. Screams Takashi Iizuka as he's dragged to the insane asylum. Back to Naka after the reportedly stressful development of Phantasy Star 2, he decided he no longer wanted to make sequels to the same game over and over again. I could point out the irony of that to you all, but let's just get a move on. After finishing work on the Genesis port of Ghouls and Ghosts, he had begun working on a space-themed game called Metal Lancer, which was revealed in 2016. It was cancelled because of the very strict Sega rule of cancel any games called Metal Lancer. His current project being given the boot, Naka was to send a list of game ideas he'd like to work on to his superior. While he most wanted to work on a racing game, it was his last suggestion that was chosen, quote, an action game to challenge Mario. Actually, the suggestion was make Nintendo eat dick, but Sega management knew what that meant. Oshima reportedly was told by others that there was only one person at Sega capable of such a task as programming a game like the one he had thought up, and that was Yuji Naka. The two were, at the time at least, fond of working with each other, and Naka was all for the challenge. Without getting too technical, the pitch made total sense for the Genesis. The hardware's biggest strength was its Motorola 68000 processor, which gave the Mega Drive a really fast CPU speed that could, if done right, stand out from the crowd of various Mario likes that had started appearing on all the consoles. Hell, even Sega was guilty of it with Alex Kidd, but this game would be something different. The project was being developed by a small group within Sega's CS R&D division, who later named themselves Sonic Team, starring a rabbit character. It made sense to use an animal that could represent speed, and at first, it could grab and throw objects with its ears. Naka was not happy with this, as he wanted to keep the controls simple so players could grasp them quickly. This is about when Hirokazu Yasuhara had joined the team. His planned departure to the US to join the new Sega Technical Institute was delayed by the First Gulf War, and agreed that this quirky rabbit game just wasn't working out. Naka asked everyone to cough up any ideas they were keeping quiet about a new ability to give the character, since the throwing objects mechanic just wasn't working. But when nobody had anything to offer, Naka decided to let everyone play with his balls.
That's how I got banned from the YMCA.
I really didn't need that mental image today.
But what Naka really meant was a somersault jump and roll. Oshima wasn't sure about this, but it did seem to solve the problem while creating another. The rabbit design just didn't make any sense anymore.
Remember that classic Looney Tunes short where Bugs Bunny does a spin dash and rips Yosemite Sam's skin off?
No, but that's probably because I don't remember any Looney Tunes short past the one where Daffy said my full name and home address on TV when I was 9.
Can something be done about him?
For the second time, the game was without a character the team was happy with. While a few character designs were considered for the game, it made the most sense to have an animal that could roll into a ball, such as a hedgehog or an armadillo. While other characters were considered, a fat man in pajamas and a hedgehog were the most likely candidates. It gets a little hazy about who the other considered characters were, as it seems both the team's concepts for what their game would be gets mixed up with the company-wide competition. No matter what happened, it seems that the idea for a hedgehog character had been floating around Sega as a whole, as Yasushi Yamaguchi, who would later work on Sonic 2 and CD, had independently come up with a hedgehog design himself. There's an old interview claiming that Oshima was inspired by this anime hedgehog and gave it his own spin, but when I asked him recently, he let me know that while he had heard of other hedgehog designs at the studio, his was made without seeing any of the others. According to Sega America, it was between a hedgehog and a chicken. Naka apparently suggested a panda at some point, due to his love of Miyazaki films. Then they entered the hedgehog in the competition to become the mascot of Sega. Of 200 entries, Sonic was one of the 8 finalists, and won overall partially due to Sonic Team having more to show off than the others. Although there were some different choices for the name. At this stage in development, the game seemed to be going by the name Wonder Dream, as provided by the second pitch document provided by Oshima not that long ago. I can infer that this design document, which we sadly don't have a lot from, comes from around April 1990, but we do know that that player character had a move called Wonder Hedgehog, so I think this must have come after Naka's involvement and after the rabbit. That makes the most sense to me, at least. It seems that regardless of where this document comes from in the development timeline, the name for the hedgehog took a while to come to life. For the longest time, Mr. Needle Mouse was cited as the original name of the blue hedgehog, something that turned out to be a simple mistranslation, with the original work in progress name being Mr. Hedgehog. They played around with working off the Japanese word of Kosoku, meaning speed of light, trying to make a name out of that, and later Raisupi and LS. They eventually settled on Sonic. The design seemed to come along quicker. His design emulates classic Golden Age animation, like Mickey Mouse or Felix the Cat. Blue was chosen to be his main color to represent Sega, as well as to mean something personal to Oshima, symbolizing to him that the open sky is blue forever. His boots, yes, their boots, were based on Michael Jackson's outfit from the Bad album, with the colors of said boots representing the most popular character in the world, Santa Claus. His attitude was later described to be similar to future President Bill Clinton, since the team hoped the game would find most success in North America. With the project finally fully greenlit in April 1990, it wasn't long before the team tried to start some world building.
You think any of the Sega staff had a vision of the future, saw Ken Penders, and woke up in a cold sweat?
How the hell do you know who Ken Penders is? You don't even know who Vector is.
Sonic the Hedgehog has been connected to some terrible shit. You guys aren't the only ones who've seen it. I've seen things that'll turn your skin white.
Many concepts of Oshima's original twin star pitch carried on into Sonic's world, with him entering this world of dreams to save the other new addition, Madonna, Sonic's incredibly attractive human girlfriend, clearly modeled after Jessica Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Madonna, however, was given a big no from Sega of America. Objections came across almost immediately. While there's some conflicting stories about who got rid of her, of course Sega of America, especially the quote-unquote mother of Sonic, Madeline Schroeder, claims she was the one that did it.
Bitch.
But I'm more inclined to believe Sonic Team, saying they took her out to remove any easy comparisons to Princess Peach. I think it's a shame Madonna was removed. Maybe a couple of things changed about her, but listen, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of my favorite films of all time. I do think that this could have worked. It's also funny how history repeats itself, but either way, it seems Madonna was removed around the same time the Nightmare plot was, and the first time Sonic was shown to the public, it was using this draft. This was the famous Tokyo Toy Show demo, something that had been sought after for years after Naka claimed it went missing sometime between 1990 and the mid-2000s. We can actually see one of the enemies from the aforementioned concept art here, making me believe that this concept was still in use at least up until the end of June 1990. One of the very few contemporary places the demo had been covered had some interesting details involving the build, including some interesting information regarding the gameplay and the quotes in the article, the most interesting being a bit about Sonic punching and kicking enemies. I asked Oshima himself about this, and this was his statement. This means to me that at this stage in development, little had been figured out in Sonic's world other than the Hedgehog running fast. And I think it's safe to say very little had been done at this time. Some executive at Sega, or a publicist, bullshitted something about Sonic punching and kicking when asked about the demo, and that was that. This demo was more than likely rushed out to show to the press that Sega had something to compete with the Super Famicom, or was actually made to pitch Sonic to Sega executives and was reused for the toy show. Very little has surfaced in the nearly 36 years since this event. A couple screenshots, rare pictures from the event, and a corner shot for a grand total of 3 whole seconds. Honestly, there's a lot we can learn from this build that at the moment is lost to time. We'll talk more about this Beta Bytes. We also have some concept art of Sonic from what I assume was after this period, of Sonic and his bandmates. See, originally Sonic had a cast of animal friends, not unlike the small animals that are inside Badix in the final game, but Sonic-sized, in a band with Sonic as the lead singer, with such members as Max Monkey, Mock the Rabbit, Sharps the Parakeet, and finally Vector the Crocodile, the only one of these characters that ever got a second chance. At some point, the plans for these characters were dropped, which is usually credited to Sega of America, and the animated sound test involving the band was dropped, which made room for the iconic Sega chant that you hear in the final game. Not so fun fact, Oshima said that he was heartbroken that the breakdancing animation he had made for the sound test was cut. And okay, we all know Oshima, Naka, and Yasuhara, but that's far from all the original Sonic team. Gina Ishiwatari Sukahara would be responsible for the Green Hill Zone. While Oshima would be the one conveying his concept drawings to the stages, said to have been inspired by Japanese artist Aizen Suzuki, he admitted that it was difficult to convey that to Sukahara and have her redo it several times. Naka joked that she worked harder than anyone else. And I mean, it clearly paid off. There aren't exactly a lot of video game levels more iconic than the Green Hill Zone, but how many of you, as of today, didn't even know her name? There's also Ryeko Kodama, who was another Phantasy Star alumni who helped bring the game to life, who did the pixel art for both Labyrinth and Starlight Zone. She was important for many reasons to Sega in general, being attached to Phantasy Star, the lead on Skies of Arcadia, and so much more. But sadly, she passed away in 2022. It's very much likely that these two women did more than what they were credited with here. No other pixel artist is credited. And here's the reason a lot of this is somewhat guesswork. A lot of the people credited at the end of Sonic 1 had to go by pseudonyms. This was a common tactic in Japan so that game developers wouldn't be poached by rival companies. And you'd think that with a game like this, we would know everyone attached, but the thing is, we don't. For example, the special thanks at the end of the game, we know that Fujio Minagishi was the one who had connections to get Masato Nakamura attached to the project. And we'll get to the music section in a second here, but we have no idea who Papa is. It's speculated that there are 2 different Sega employees that both use that pseudonym. But isn't it wild that we still don't know who did what for a game so important nearly 35 years later? And while all of this was going on, from the beginning, Masato Nakamura was chosen to compose the music for Sonic. Well, as a North American, I'm not so familiar with his non-Sonic music. In Japan, he is a part of a major pop band, Dreams Come True, who in 1990 were just starting to become well known. And Nakamura has said several times that he decided to make a score not like a game, but rather like a film. And Hiroshi Kubota would be responsible for converting Nakamura's music to play on the Genesis, and Yukifumi Makino would be responsible for the sound effects of the game, like the Chaos Emerald jingle and the drowning theme.
That motherfucker.
And finally, Kaisuke Sukahara was the one who recorded the famous Sega chant. And Akira Watanabe did the famous Japanese cover art, basing it partially off the logos used at the Live Under the Sky Jazz Festival, which was held in Japan between 1977 and 1992. And okay, there's been a lot said about Sega of America's involvement in the creation of Sonic over the years. Hell, I just made a joke about them removing Madonna. It's called nuance. Video game developer legend Mark Cerny once said in one of his very few interviews involving his time at Sega that when he was shown Sonic and asked if he thought it would succeed, he didn't feel comfortable answering for the entire country. He did also add that when Sega of America saw Sonic, the response wasn't positive. Michael Katz, the CEO of Sega of America at that time, thought the idea was unsalvageable. He had made a list of why he felt Sonic wouldn't work and handed it off to Shinobu Toyota, who was vice president and mediator between both sides. Al Nelson, director of marketing, felt similarly at first, and there's the key factor to all of this. At first. There's a pretty well-known story that Sega of America felt that they should hire Will Vinton, the designer of the California Raisins, or someone similar to design something more American. Yeah, that's pretty rude. Was it unreasonable to say Sonic was at least a little bit risky? I explained this out of order, so remember. It's easy to dismiss any concern Sega of America could have had over being faxed over a black and white image of a spiky thing with fangs, human girlfriend, and bizarre iconography. Which sure, now we're like, let them cook. The 90s were a very different time. One wrong step and suddenly Nintendo is uncontested for 40 years. And the industry is even shittier state than it is now. But something most Sega of America critiques ignore is how during any interview that they have ever given, they always say the same thing. The moment they saw a version of Sonic running around, collecting rings, it all sort of clicked for everyone. They suddenly knew they had a potential Mario killer on their hands. And if anything, Nintendo was shooting themselves in the foot. Super Mario Bros. 4. During the game's entire development, it was being compared to its predecessor, even internally. That put a lot of pressure on the staff, and ultimately, Super Mario World, as it was called when it was released in Japan in 1990, while still a wonderful game, it was still considered very similar to Mario 3, which at the time was a bad look for a launch title of a $199 new system, especially when upgrading wasn't the norm. Can't you see how the cash-strapped soccer moms felt?
Yeah. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to explain to him how people market things to make you spend more money.
And really, were they wrong to feel that way? Did Mario World really look that much different in comparison? I don't need to piss people off more than I already have, daring to claim that Mario World wasn't all that in a $199 bag of chips. But when Sega of America saw their new mascot game next to Mario, the one the Japanese Sonic team had made to appeal to their market, it clicked. It was clear which one seemed to use their 16-bit tech better, and Sega was planning to capitalize on just that. And again, for all the Sega of America bashing I see online, I never see people mentioning how with open arms, Tom Kalinske, the next CEO, took over for Kaz in July 1990, and the rest of the team took their new son in and made them go head-on with Nintendo. In probably the best known story of this game's development, Kalinske wanted to bring the Genesis price down to undercut Nintendo and pack in Sonic the Hedgehog with their console, just like how Sega of America would pack Mario World in with their console. The entire Japanese staff hated this decision, but ultimately, Kalinske was allowed to do with what he wanted. which would have been nice if that carried on throughout the 90s, but that's a whole other issue. Eventually, the big, meaty, girthy game would be finished quite a bit behind schedule. All 512 kilobytes of it. Hirokazu Yasuhara had mentioned recently in an interview that he'd often be working 18-hour days, spending the entire day as just trying to send game data from Japan to the US digitally through an FTP connection of some kind. It's again amusing considering how far we've come. That does make that comment earlier about Ishiwatari working harder than the rest of the team even more concerning. The game would end up being released on June 23rd, 1991. Or, well, that's the official date. Many people report that they picked up the game as early as June 19th. What you need to understand about game releases back then is that they'd be shipped out and were just put out when the game stores got them. The 23rd is just the official date in the record books. Regardless, it was a pretty good day for autism. When we come back after a short break, we'll cover the story mechanics.